What's
Hey
up?
guys,
We're live.
we are live. It is Monday night.
And we're going to do a good one tonight. I'm excited.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people waiting a long time for what we're about to go over. And, we've had some crazy times, obviously, these last 2 years. And I feel like it's led us to this place and the topic that we're going to talk about tonight. We've seen a lot of the things we're going to talk about for a long time, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more science backing it now.
Yeah,
a lot more proof, a lot more people that have experienced it.
Yeah, so if you have anybody that's had any kind of long-term problem with the virus, if you have anybody with the vaccine, this is something you really want to either share with them or you want to get them on board and call them and check them out. Because, I've been doing this for, functional medicine now for almost 18 years. And because we see a lot of people in the practice, we have a unique perspective to society, and we get to see all walks of life come and go. And inside of that, you start to see patterns, and it's weird. Like when you step back, you can watch things go and change and move just by the amount of people that are walking in the door. So if this is something that you are having an issue with or struggling with, and I'm going to give you some examples of that stuff in a few minutes when we go through it, this is something you really want to pay attention to, because I think there's some good stuff here. Absolutely.
So what we're talking about tonight is long hauler syndrome. This is been played out and underplayed. It's being played out in life every day, but not on the news. But it is happening in science. So it's a massive pandemic. And as you can see, over 50 million people have contracted COVID worldwide.
80% have persistent fatigue, 73% experience tiredness after exertion, 58% experience cognitive dysfunction, which is a pretty big number. And now at least some people have excuses why they're having cognitive dysfunction. She's been using it the whole time.
I blamed it on menopause, but now I'm going to blame it on COVID.
56% decrease in sensory motor function, 84% experience long-lasting headaches, and then 51% experiencing memory loss. So we did this talk for a bunch of people at a dinner talk one night. It was pretty interesting. Got a lot of great responses through it. So we figured we'd share some of the highlights with this for you guys tonight. Interesting things here. 200 different types of symptoms coming out of this thing, right? So when we're talking about this, it's on what I've noticed. It's neither. There's no sides to it. It's if you've had it and you've been jabbed, it doesn't matter. It ends up being the same end result. So understand that. Like there's no well, I haven't and I have, and did you or did I not? Did you have it twice? Did you have it once? It doesn't really make a difference.
Doesn't matter if you have the Delta or the Omicron or whatever. It doesn't matter. You're being exposed to the same thing, which I think is what you're going to go over next, right?
Exactly. So just when you start talking about these things, common things are the brain fog, the fatigue, shortness of breath, muscle weakness, and a variety of other things. And we'll go into that a little bit deeper. But there's a lot of different stuff happening. So
I love this analogy.
So first things first, let's just talk about a cell, right? And just picture a round circle in your head, and then on that circle, there's all these receptors, and there are little millions of them that go on. I mention this in almost every talk I do. And those receptors are basically a lock, right? And then the key is going to be whether it's a hormone, whether it's a virus, whatever's insulin, which is a hormone, anything that's trying to come into the cell and make contact with the cell is how it's getting to the cell. So this whole concept is very basic. It's biology 101. It's really easy. You have a receptor, you have a whatever, and it's trying to get into the cell and do its thing and talk what's happening. Well, once you understand that, that's the essence of how the virus enters, essence of how hormones get in. So it's
and the receptor you're saying is the lock.
Yes, the receptor is the lock.
Receptor is the lock, and whatever it is that's trying to get into the cell is the key that's supposed to fit inside the lock and open up the cell so we can get in. So
that's basically the ball would be the key. The ball would be the key, and the pink would be the lock. So just give you a perception of what it looks like on the cell. So when you talking about exactly like how was COVID affecting us in that sense, well, what's interesting about it is it has basically it goes to that receptor, kind of binds to it, and it actually has that spike protein we've all heard about a million times, and it goes in there, and that's how it enters the cell. It goes in there, so it attaches into that receptor site, goes into the cell, does what it's supposed to do. Well, this is where it gets fun right here, right? How does this affect you? And I don't think anybody's really explained it this way. And this is basic, but it's super accurate. So when a cell goes in, when COVID comes in, it goes into the cell, it enters into the cell, it releases its mRNA into the cell, it multiplies.
Which is genetic material.
Right. It hijacks the cell in a sense, genetically goes in, changes the cell over. Now the cell's confused. It doesn't know what to do. It now kills the cell from the inside out over and over and over again, into the point where the cell kind of explodes and is full of fluid, and it has all these different inflammatory responses. And again, I'm giving you the landscape perspective of this. But what's interesting is once it goes in, there's a delayed reaction. So what happens is, this is why people got sick with it. The spike protein creates this, it goes in, has the mRNA reaction, creates this, all these antibodies and helpers to come out and fight, but they take a second to get there. And by the time they actually get caught up, if it's a fast moving virus, it duplicates itself faster than you can actually get the army there. That's
what COVID is doing.
And that was COVID was doing, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was they said, okay, well, let's look at this thing. And that's how some people just couldn't get the reaction fast enough and slow it down. So they got this big inflammatory response, which was mucosal driven for many people. And that's why you got the fluid, the fluid full, the lungs full of fluid, because literally it would literally make the cells fill with fluid and go over and over and over again. So literally it would take the oxygen out of the receptors. So the red blood cells couldn't accept the oxygen, which then created suffocation, which the cell, it just became this big toilet bowl cycle of bad, right? So that's the, again, 101 version of it without going too crazy. But this is the nut and bolts of this. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to go through some of the detail with you guys. This is where it gets fun. So there's 26 different spike proteins on the virus, okay? People don't understand that. There's 26, so those spikes, there's 26 different types. What's interesting was that in the vaccine, they gave you one of the spikes. So they gave you one of those particular spike proteins. So what's interesting is when we figured it out, we don't know how, if there's 26, you reacted to number 25, someone else might have reacted number 1. So we don't know
they're picking maybe number 5.
Yeah, and they might have picked number 5.
Very similar to the flu.
Yeah, we don't know.
When you make a flu vaccine, they're picking one strand, one strain of a multitude that could be out next year.
100%.
Or 2 years from now.
Right, exactly. So that's why that came in there. So it's interesting they picked one of them, which we really don't know what mRNA part of that they picked, but they picked one of them. And then 26 different proteins live inside COVID itself. So again, the roulette wheel is unique. We don't understand how it does that, but we know it has an effect, and we know it creates inflammatory responses, and we know it creates a whole cascade of immune responses, but we just don't know exactly what it does. Well, here's where it gets interesting, right? So the vaccine took one of the 26 RNA. The principal idea was that once you took the spike, just the spike, not the whole virus, you just took the end of it, you detached the virus from it, you put the spike in, it now goes into the cell. And the idea was to trick the cell into thinking the virus was there, create an immune response. Therefore, if you saw the virus, you could have a response to it. In theory, good idea. In theory, right? Here's the problem. We have no idea where the spike goes. We have no idea how it interacts with other different tissues. And I have a plethora of research that says that.
Well, and we're also finding on autopsies that the spike proteins are going to all organs.
Correct. So we don't know how it's crossing, where it's going, and what the response is. So that's the interesting side of it.
Which, by the way, folks, we are saying a scary little dirty word that we're not supposed to be saying. So hopefully this goes out. Right. Yeah, hopefully this will air one, and hopefully we will not get shut down.
Yeah. So issues, we don't understand how the spike protein is understood in every cell. Number 2, once it attaches to the inhibitor, which is the receptor for, call it, natural inflammatory responses happen. But what happened often, it creates an overload issue, right? Which ends up actually damaging the cell and creating a hyper response. So
like a hyperimmune response, like the body responds.
It's overdone, right? It goes over responsive. So that's, you understand, the first part of any process is inflammatory, which is good.
Right.
Don't misunderstand that. Inflammation is a necessary part.
Right.
The problem is when a second layer comes in, it's bad.
When it doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
Right. When your body's constantly in a chronic state of inflammation, that's where it gets bad.
So just to give you an example, like this is just a quick article, right? This is from Mount Sinai. I'm sorry, Cedar Sinai investigators, right? It was in a Journal of Translational Medicine. Infection of the virus can cause COVID-19 can trigger an immune response that lasts well beyond the initial infection and recovery, even among people who had mild symptoms or no symptoms at all, right? The findings are published in the Journal of Translational Medicine. We found that signals of autoantibody activity that are usually linked to chronic inflammatory and injury involving specific organ systems in tissues such as joints, skin, and nervous systems. And that's just a few to mention. And what I found extremely interesting this last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, is that I've probably had 30, 35 people, maybe plus, with weird sinus infections, weird allergies, or hyperallergies. And I asked everybody the same thing. I said, hey, have you had a sinus infection a long time? And everybody's answer was whether they've been jabbed, not jabbed, whether there's a big difference, whether they they've all had it, right? If they or jabbed. I said to them, what is it that, what have you had a sinus infection a long time? And they were like, no, I haven't had a sinus infection in 10, 5, 10, 20, whatever it was, right? Or someone has really bad allergies. I'm like, how's your allergies been the last 3 to 5 years? Like, oh, I get a little allergies, but not real bad. And what's been interesting is everybody's been hypered. I'm seeing people that had autoimmune issues coming in hyper.
Turned on, yeah.
Right. And what seems to be a trigger is that the virus doesn't go away. This is just like, I'll give you a good parallel. And I mentioned this in the talk when I do the whole thing, is Epstein-Barr. Epstein-Barr is your mono or kissing disease, AKA, right? So Epstein-Barr is a virus that has an affinity. It normally hangs out in the corner. It doesn't bother nobody. It's happy and it does its own thing, right? And if it stays in the corner, the immune system keeps it at check, everybody's happy. It doesn't bother nobody, kind of stays dormant, kind of hangs out in the cells, and it doesn't do anything with everybody.
Can Lyme always also be like that?
Lyme's very similar to some degree of that. It has similarities. Let me say that. That's very similar.
One of those viruses that can kind of sit dormant until it gets like, hello, wake up.
Lyme's has a different mechanism, but it's close in some of the mechanisms. So anyway, with that said, COVID is taking on the same principles of that, where it seems to be, some people, it can hide it in a corner and hang out with it. But if the immune system drops, it gets triggered. So the example I always give, when I got sick years ago, I could eat poison ivy, eat it, never had a problem. My whole entire life, never had an issue with it. All of a sudden, I started going outside and getting poison ivy all the time. And this is right before I figured out what was going on with me. And I was like, why am I getting poison ivy not now after 30 something years? Why would I get poison ivy when I could roll around it as a kid? It's because my immune system dropped and it was able to kind of come out. My body could not respond to it. Therefore, it became
you weren't adapting to your environment anymore. It was too stressful.
Exactly. Same thing here. Yeah. What we're seeing is that this virus, with the decreased immune system, whether it's environmental, whether it's stress, whether it's GI, whatever's going on, it drops down. Now that virus is able to come up. Now, when the virus is there and you have a stimulant like an allergy, it's hyper responsive. So you go from a 2 to a 10, 2 to a 9, 2 to an 8. Get that?
Yeah.
And we're seeing it in all these other processes too. And it's very unique. So the interesting thing, people go, why do I get sinuses and someone else is getting GI or someone else is getting whatever? It's because your roulette wheel is that way. Like, it's the way your immune system is seeing it and hearing it, and it doesn't know how to go in there.
So, I mean, the way I look at it is we all have weaknesses. So, our body is going to express only about 33% of our genetics. And then the way that we live is going to expose those genetics.
Correct.
That, like, maybe mom had diabetes. Now I eat like she did, and I live like her did. I was exposed, like mental, emotional stresses, chemical stresses. And now I have diabetes like mom. It's very similar in the same way. I believe that when you suppress the immune system, any of the low-lying fruit, like those genetic exposures that were there just waiting to be picked or waiting to be opened up and exposed, all of a sudden, now there you go. Now they're like, hello, we're here. We've been waiting to be let open. And now we're going to run wild.
It's like another analogy I use all the time, and I use this in almost every consult, is think of this. If me and you were having a conversation, our conversation's good right now. Then all of a sudden the phone rings. Your phone rings. The dogs start barking. Someone else comes in the door. at some point, I don't care how focused we are, our conversation is diluted. That's your immune system to a T. Like there's some point your immune system gets it's convoluted, that
It's too much work.
It's too much work. It doesn't understand, and it's like, you know what? I'm not worried about the thing in the corner no more. I'm gonna let it go. That's another reason why we're seeing lots of people come in with higher Epstein-Barr viruses, and I think it's one of the major drivers is because there's two major conversations happening, and it doesn't know how to decipher between the two of them.
Right.
Right. Not to rule out anything else that's happening, whether it's parasitic, whatever's going on in the body. We just have no clue. So that's what's really happening there. So that's where you look at that and you say, well, what are some of the things you can do with helping it, right? Well, or the current theories that are going on in here, right? So there's virals, right? We just talked about ghost viruses, immune responses through widespread inflammation, which we know is very chronic in this country. Remember, insulin, sugar is all chronic inflammatory stuff that drives. That's just one example. Mitochondrial impairment and cellular and cell danger response. So the body's over responding to that danger, but mitochondria is what builds energy, ATP. It's where we're
in the cell.
In the cell. That's what actually makes your energy. And what happens when the virus is in there, it disrupts the way it makes energy. That's why people are fatigued. Extremely fatigued.
You remember, if the energy comes from inside the cell and the spike protein is going in there and destroying the cell.
Well, the virus is in there causing havoc on the design of the ATP, so the cell isn't making as much energy as it should, or stealing the thunder from the cell, the energy, right? So dormant pathogens awaken, that's what we're talking about. So things like, it could be parasites, it could be bacteria, it could be viruses, anything else that's going on. Mast cell activation. This is something that I'm reading a book on right now. It's incredible. If you've never heard of mast cell activation, you should probably look it up. And Nad Imbalance, really interesting stuff. Again, it has a lot to do with the inflammatory responses. Overlap of multiple conditions. Again, that's just stacking what I was saying. And persistent brainstem dysfunction. Interesting because the virus enters through your nasal cavity, right? Which is going through, and it goes right on your nerves. So therefore, it's creating this pathway. A lot of the research is saying, interesting how it goes through there, how it's affecting middle brain, lots of stuff of how it's settled there. Just really wild research. The research, when I got into this, I was thinking it'd be sparse. What I found was the total opposite. I had so much research, I just really couldn't read it all. I probably read 200 journals on this stuff, and I could have read another 2,000 on things that I'm talking about.
Which, once again, you're not going to see on the news.
You're not going to see that, right? And then microbiome dysfunction, which is your gut, right? So the fourth major pillars to approach, or any approach that you should be dealing with this, and is inflammatory and autoimmune balance, right? So how much inflammation to autoimmune do you have? And you got to make sure that you're balancing through that. Number two would be cellular optimization, making sure your cells are working properly and you're getting the right fuel in and right energy out. Because if you give it cheap energy, the cells are going to eat it up, the virus will suck it up, and it just decreases your immune system. And that happens for anything like pathogenic, bacterial, viral, I don't care what it is, cancer, it's across the board. Lots of research on that as well. Number three is antimicrobials and antivirals. There's lots of things you can do inside that space that have I can't say the word.
Microbial.
Thank you. And antiviral properties. And so lots of different things. There's a whole pillar of things inside that world. The trick is finding the right combination that works for you and what you're actually happening inside your body. And then obviously nutrition. We're a big advocate. We've said this 1,000 times, that what you eat is really is your medicine. So
if someone were to come with you with new, or since, the vaccine, or since COVID, exhaustion, or these sinus and allergy issues, or autoimmune issues that have surfaced or resurfaced. I mean, we've seen a lot of cancer come back and show up like this now too. Yeah. How would you handle that? Well, it's basics. It's building blocks. Like, we always find out, like, what was your history prior and what was going on with you. And then we try to look at those cracks in the problem. And then we look at the impact of what this has done. Right. So you can't go after the end in this situation. You have to go back to the beginning. And often people have gut issues. They have sugar issues. They have imbalances, whether it's in immune responses or other genetic issues.
So they have these things happening, and you have to go in there and start cleaning some of that up back here, so you could fix this side of it. If you try to do it the other way, it doesn't work. At least in my opinion, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I just think people get sicker instead of healthier.
Do you see this thing going away, or do you see this being a long-term problem for people? Like if they just go and take something to make them feel better in the moment, do you think it's something?
Do you know what? It's a great question. I have no clue. I don't. So I mean, here we are at the, beginning end of this, if you will. Like how long ago has kind of gone away? Maybe 6 months ago, and this is starting to come out pretty prevalent now. Like in allergy season, what's going to happen in flu season? I have no idea. Like we don't know. Right. But in November, flu season could be nuts, right? So who knows? Because
they're
now
going to keep giving boosters,
and that's the other side of it too. So we don't know how that spike is going around and causing things to do that. So again, as that happens and it unfolds, we have to really look at it and say, what is the outcome of it, and what is it going to look like? And no one really knows. All I know is that if you are experiencing some of these things, then that is your response. And you're like, man, it's different from before and after. Whether you've had it, whether you've been jacked, I don't care. It's just different. And you're like, something's up. That's when you really got to start investigating this and saying, what am I doing? Because you've got to get your immune system working better so that it's able to put that thing back in the corner. If not, you're going to be dealing with it. And the longer it's there, the harder it is to work with. And two, it creates more havoc and the more damage it does. So it's just some things I'm just, talking about. I think it was a good conversation we can have tonight. I know we talked about bringing some stuff up, but I think that's probably the nuts and bolts of what I've seen. I'm learning every single day new things. It's just that kind of a emerging kind of
well,
science.
some of those things, the more you see, the more you learn about it.
So I wish I had all the answers, but I have a few of the answers, and I feel like those answers are important and impactful because they at least start getting people on the right track. And it's definitely something that I've seen in my own body and watched it and been like, wow, that was weird how that worked. And, yours and my other patients and everybody walking in doors. So, I hope that answered some curiosity, some questions. If you have questions, how can they get in touch with us on our Facebook page or? Yeah,
actually right below, I know there's a place you could do comments, but for some reason we always have trouble with this darn StreamYard. But you can go ahead and write your comments. We can't answer them right now.
We'll answer them afterwards.
Yeah, especially the way we're situated here with the computer and everything.
You could even DM us on our Facebook privately. And we
Absolutely.
Can get in touch with you.
Yeah, or call our office. And here's the reality. I don't care what it is. I don't care where you are in life, whether you're dealing with the after effects of these spike proteins, or this is just your life in general, or menopause like me. The first thing that you always want to do is get back to ground zero.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? What is going on with me? And I don't want to just treat a symptom. I want to be well because I'm 51 right now, but next year I'm going to be 52, and 10 years from then I'm going to be 62, right? So I want to know that.
No, you say that. I'm sorry.
You are right behind me. I want to make sure you suffer every single moment of your aging. So the bottom line is, though, because we see people of all ages in our practice. My specialty is pediatrics and pregnancy, but our oldest patients are in their late 80s. And here's the bottom line. I don't know how long I'm going to be here.
Right.
But when I see people who come in and they say, why didn't anybody tell me? Right. It makes me so angry. Yeah. So for as long as I'm here, I want to be functional and healthy and living the life that I know I'm capable of living. I know when I get out of bed or when I wake up in the morning, I know I can get out of bed. Yeah. Right? I know that I can go do the things that I set out to do because right now I'm fully capable. Right. But when you start falling apart and you don't take care of yourself, you're heading down a slippery slope. And if you don't put the brakes on, it's not going to stop. So my recommendation for anyone in any age or stage of their lives is to take care of yourself and look for help. Right now, we live in a world that's so disconjointed. We have nobody to count on. The tribe is gone. We don't live where our families live. We don't have mom to support us and watch the kids, the grandparents, and so on. So we're really disconnected. So a place like ours, places like ours, are tribes.
There's a lot of them out there.
Culture. There are.
Yeah, a lot of great places.
And I'm telling you, you can see Align Life is up on the slideshow. I'm telling you, we coach the practices. These are tribal in nature, and you will find a culture there that you can lean into and get help. We all need help. You do not have all the answers, but there are answers out there. So lean into people who look to the other side of just treating symptoms. And it doesn't mean that you don't need to do that sometimes, but lean into people who can lead you down a path of being well forever.
Great point. Hey, I hope that was helpful tonight. I hope that gave you some insights and things that are happening and maybe explained it in a way you never heard before. And hopefully that was great. And if you liked it, just do me a favor, share it out with other people.
Yeah,
I think it's a
please
great
do.
message.
Share the message.
It's one of those messages I think is really important. And I think people are unaware of it. And they're not really like, okay, it's behind us, thank God, but they're not really seeing the consequence that could be in front of them, or they are already feeling it and they know like, hey, this isn't right. So please do that. It'd be great. I appreciate it. And if anybody needs any help, just please reach out to us.
Yeah, I was going to say he probably will want to kill me on this because he's super, super busy and his schedule is hard to get in on. But Dr. Joe does see patients via Zoom.
Yeah, I can. It's just
there's only so many hours in the day.
And if I can't get to it, I have some great friends in the world that can also refer if I have to. So guys, thank you so much. I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you guys soon. Be good.